I noticed it on a Tuesday evening in March. An alert on my phone while I was cooking dinner. A transfer of $5,000 from our joint savings account to an account I didn't recognize. The notification glowed against the screen. Transfer complete. My wooden spoon paused mid-stir in the pot of marinara sauce I was making, his favorite. For 32 years of marriage, I had always handled our finances. He had never shown interest until 3 months ago. The kitchen timer buzzed. I silenced the alert, tucked my phone away, and called upstairs. Dinner in 5. My voice carried through our 3-bedroom colonial, the home we'd shared for 27 years, the home where we'd raised our daughter, now living across the country with her own family. The home I had spent decades turning into something beautiful. His footsteps creaked above me. Then his voice, hushed, urgent, drifted down the staircase. I have to go. She's calling me for dinner. A pause, laughter, low and conspiratorial. Don't worry. It's all proceeding according to plan. I didn't move. The sauce bubbled softly on the stove. I turned off the heat and stirred mechanically, my mind racing through the past few months of subtle changes. The locked phone, the late night, work calls, the sudden interest in our retirement accounts, the trips to the bank without me. He appeared in the doorway, tucking his phone into his pocket and smiling. That same smile I'd loved for decades, now transformed into something that made my stomach tighten. Smells amazing, he said. I smiled back, passing him a glass of wine. Hope you're hungry, I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. That night, as he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and thought about the woman I had become. A retired school principal, a mother, a grandmother, a wife who had spent the last 3 decades building a life with a man who was now carefully dismantling it behind my back. I thought about the inheritance from my parents that had paid for our first home. I thought about the vacation property in Michigan that had been in my family for generations. I thought about the retirement we had planned together, the cruises, the road trips, the quiet evenings on the porch. I must have fallen asleep eventually because I dreamed of drowning, water closing over my head while someone I trusted held me under. I woke at 3 a.m., sweating despite the cool March air drifting through our cracked window. Beside me, he was absent from the bed. The blue light of a screen glowed from our ensuite bathroom. I could hear him whispering. I didn't get up to eavesdrop. Instead, I made a decision. I would not confront. I would not cry. I would not beg. I would not break. I would plan. The next morning, I kissed him goodbye as he left for his consulting job, the same way I had for decades. Only this time, once his car pulled out of the driveway, I didn't return to my coffee and crossword. Instead, I sat down at my computer and began to research divorce attorneys in our area. By noon, I had an appointment with Patricia Haynes, described online as specializing in high-conflict divorce cases and asset protection for clients over 50. 2 days later, I sat across from Patricia in her office downtown. She was perhaps 10 years younger than me, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. I laid out the evidence, the unexplained transfers, the secrecy, the whispered phone calls, the shift in behavior. I believe my husband is planning to leave me, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. And I believe he intends to take as much as he can when he goes. Patricia didn't look shocked. She didn't offer platitudes or reassurances. Instead, she nodded and began taking notes. How long have you been married? She asked. 32 years. Children. 1 daughter. Adult, married, living in California. Joint accounts? Yes. Checking, savings, investment portfolio. The house is in both our names. Any separate accounts or assets? I have an inheritance from my parents that came through 5 years ago. Most of it went into our joint investment account. But there's still about the $300,000 in a separate account in my name. And there's a vacation property in northern Michigan that's been in my family for generations. My name is on the deed. Patricia nodded again, making notes. What about retirement accounts? We each have our own. Mine from my years as a principal, his from the university where he taught before switching to consulting. She looked up from her notepad. What's your goal here? I considered the question. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Security? I want what's rightfully mine, I said finally. I want to protect what I've earned and what my family left me. I want to make sure that when he makes his move, I'm not left scrambling. And I paused, surprised by the cold anger in my voice. I want him to realize that he underestimated me. Patricia smiled for the first time. Good. That's a goal we can work with. She leaned forward. Here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to document everything. Every transfer, every suspicious call, every change in pattern. Second, we're going to protect your assets, particularly that inheritance and family property. Third, we're going to prepare to file first, but we won't pull that trigger until we have everything in place. She passed me a legal pad. I need you to create a timeline. Start from when you first noticed changes in his behavior. Include everything, no matter how small it seems. Dates, times, amounts, conversations. Meanwhile, I'm going to bring in a financial forensic specialist. We need to know exactly what we're dealing with. As I left her office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Control. I wasn't a victim. I was a strategist. That evening, when he called to say he'd be working late, I didn't protest. Instead, I used the time to begin my timeline. I scrolled through bank statements, credit card bills, text messages. I noted how his work trips had increased in frequency over the past 6 months, how our joint savings had slowly been depleted through small regular transfers to an account I couldn't trace, how he had begun asking casual questions about my inheritance, about the vacation property, about my retirement portfolio. The pattern emerged clearly. He had been planning this for at least 6 months, maybe longer. This wasn't a sudden decision or a midlife crisis. This was calculated, and that calculation had likely included an assessment of me as an easy target, a trusting wife who wouldn't notice the slow dismantling of our financial foundation. He had forgotten that before I was his wife, I had been a principal who managed budgets in the millions, who handled staff conflicts and parent confrontations, who built systems that worked and fixed ones that didn't. He had forgotten, or perhaps never truly known, who I was. Over the next 3 weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was the same wife I had always been, cooking his favorite meals, asking about his day, maintaining our routines. By night, while he slept or took his mysterious phone calls, I met with Patricia and her team, gathered evidence, and fortified my position. The financial forensic specialist Patricia brought in, a meticulous man named Howard, discovered offshore accounts opened in my husband's name 9 months earlier. He found evidence of consultancy fees being diverted before they hit our joint accounts. He uncovered a rental agreement for an apartment in a city 2 hours away, paid 6 months in advance. He's been planning this for some time. Howard told me during a meeting in Patricia's office, and he's been fairly careful, but not careful enough. Patricia outlined our counter strategy. First, we would move my inheritance into a protected trust, one that would be difficult for him to touch in a divorce proceeding, given that inheritances are typically considered separate property in our state. Second, we would document the commingling of assets to establish what portion of our marital property stemmed from my contributions versus his. Third, we would gather evidence of his financial misconduct, the hidden accounts, the diverted income, the secret apartment, to strengthen my position when it came time to divide assets. Fourth, and most crucially, we would file for divorce first, but only when every protection was in place. The element of surprise works both ways, Patricia explained. He thinks he's going to blindside you. We're going to let him think that right up until the moment he realizes you've been 3 steps ahead all along. I threw myself into the work, finding a strange comfort in the detailed documentation of my marriage's demise. I hired a private investigator who confirmed what I already suspected. There was someone else, a woman in her 40s who worked at the same consulting firm. They had been seen together at restaurants, entering the secret apartment, shopping for furniture, planning a new life with my money. The most difficult part was maintaining the facade at home. Each morning I kissed him goodbye as if nothing had changed. Each evening I asked about his day, as if I believed his lies. Each night I lay beside him, listening to him breathe, wondering how someone could share a bed with a person for over 3 decades and still be capable of such betrayal. Then came the day that turned cold calculation into burning resolve. It was a Saturday afternoon. He had told me he was meeting colleagues to prepare for a Monday presentation. I knew, thanks to the private investigator, that he was actually meeting his attorney. I used the opportunity to install a small recording device in his home office, a step Patricia had advised was legal in our state, as it was my home too, though the recording would have limited use in court. When he returned, he seemed agitated, immediately shutting himself in his office. I made dinner, listening to the murmur of his voice through the door. At 7 p.m., I knocked and called him to eat. He emerged, distracted, barely touching the meal I'd prepared. After dinner, he retreated back to his office while I cleaned up. Later that night, I retrieved the device and listened to the recording. Most of it was mundane, keyboard clicking, papers shuffling. Then, at 6:43 p.m., a phone call. "Hey, it's me." My husband's voice, casual and relaxed in a way it hadn't been with me in months. "Just got back from meeting with the attorney. Everything's on track for next Friday." A pause. "Yeah, she doesn't suspect a thing. You should see her, still making my favorite meals, asking about my day." Laughter. "The attorney says timing is everything. I file first, move the remaining joint assets immediately, then serve her papers here at the house. By the time she figures out what's happening, I'll have control of the accounts, and we can start the negotiations from a position of strength." Another pause. His voice dropped lower. "The inheritance is the main target, and that property in Michigan, lakefront real estate, is worth a fortune now. My attorney thinks I can make a claim on both since they've been used for marital purposes." Another laugh. "Planning to bleed her dry and disappear before she knows what hit her. 32 years of playing the devoted husband finally pays off." The recording continued, but I had heard enough. I sat in my darkened kitchen, the recorder clutched in my hand, a strange calm settling over me. This wasn't just financial betrayal. It was an erasure of our entire history together. Every anniversary celebration, every family holiday, every moment I thought we were building something together. All of it reduced to a long con with a $300,000 inheritance as the prize. I copied the recording and sent it to Patricia that night. The next morning, she called me. "This changes things," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger on my behalf. "We have clear evidence of intent to defraud. We need to move faster than we planned. Can you come in this afternoon?" For the next 5 days, we worked frantically to execute our plan before his Friday deadline. The inheritance was moved into an irrevocable trust with my daughter as beneficiary. The Michigan property was protected through a quiet title transfer. Documentation of the offshore accounts and diverted income was prepared for court filing. And most importantly, my divorce petition was drawn up, citing financial misconduct and fraudulent dissipation of marital assets. On Thursday, one day before his planned ambush, I filed for divorce and obtained emergency orders freezing our joint accounts. That night, I made his favorite dinner one last time. Pot roast with roasted potatoes and carrots, the meal I had cooked for special occasions throughout our marriage. I set the table with our good china, poured wine into crystal glasses, even lit candles. He looked surprised when he came home to find me dressed nicely, the dining room prepared as if for a celebration. "What's all this?" he asked, hanging up his coat. 32 years, I said simply. Thought we should mark the occasion. He hesitated, then smiled. That same false smile I had come to recognize. Of course. 32 amazing years. We ate dinner with the practiced ease of a long-married couple. We talked about safe topics, the weather, our daughter's recent promotion, plans for the garden this spring. Plans I knew he had no intention of being around to see realized. As we finished dessert, his favorite apple pie, he reached across the table and took my hand. "You know," he said, his voice gentle in a way that once would have moved me. "I've been thinking we should take that Mediterranean cruise we've been talking about. Maybe for our anniversary in June." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing my husband's face, a man planning to destroy me while making vacation plans we would never take. I squeezed his hand once, then pulled away. "That sounds lovely," I said, standing to clear the plates. "We can talk about it tomorrow." That night, I slept in the guest room, telling him I thought I might be coming down with something and didn't want to disturb his sleep. In reality, I couldn't bear to spend one more night pretending. Friday dawned clear and cool. I rose early, dressed carefully in a navy suit I had worn for school board meetings in my principal days, and made coffee. He came downstairs at 7:30, surprise registering when he saw me fully dressed, sipping coffee at the kitchen island. "You're up early," he said, pouring himself a cup. "Feeling better?" "Much," I replied. "I have some errands to run this morning. I should be back around noon." He nodded, relief crossing his features. According to the schedule I'd overheard, he planned to empty our accounts and have his attorney deliver the divorce papers while I was out of the house. The final cowardly act in his elaborate betrayal. "I might be out when you get back," he said casually. "Meeting with clients." "No problem," I answered, rising to rinse my cup. "I'm sure I'll find ways to occupy myself." I left the house at 8 a.m. and drove straight to Patricia's office, where we waited. At 9:15, she received confirmation. He had attempted to transfer the remaining funds from our joint savings and checking accounts, only to discover they had been frozen by court order. At 10:30, a second confirmation. He had tried to access my inheritance account, which was now safely in a trust. At 11:45, I returned home, Patricia's associate following in a separate car with a court officer. I found him in his office, face flushed with anger, phone pressed to his ear. "What do you mean, already filed?" he was saying as I appeared in the doorway. "That's not possible. She doesn't..." He looked up and saw me standing there, still in my navy suit, calm and composed. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, then set it down slowly. "You're back early," he managed. "Actually, I'm right on time," I replied. "Your attorney should be arriving any minute with divorce papers for me. Mine is already here, with papers for you." The doorbell rang as if on cue, his face drained of color as understanding dawned. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Long enough to protect what's mine," I answered. The next hour passed in a blur of legal formalities. His attorney arrived as predicted, carrying divorce papers that now served no purpose. He was stunned to find another attorney already present, serving his client with papers filed the day before. The court officer explained that the joint accounts had been frozen, pending investigation of financial misconduct. My husband's carefully constructed plan collapsed in real time as he learned that the inheritance was now in an irrevocable trust, the Michigan property protected, and his offshore accounts and secret apartment documented as evidence of fraudulent intent. When everyone finally left, we stood in the living room we had furnished together decades earlier, the silent witnesses of our family photos looking down from the walls. "You recorded me," he said finally, accusation heavy in his voice. "Yes," I admitted. "After months of watching you dismantle our life together, I needed to know the truth." "That won't be admissible in court." "Perhaps not. But the financial records are, the offshore accounts are, the apartment leases, the diverted consulting fees are." I paused. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Did you really think I would be that easy to destroy?" He had no answer for that. Instead, he gathered some belongings and left, presumably for the apartment he thought I knew nothing about. As his car pulled away, I stood in the doorway of our home, feeling neither triumph nor despair, but a strange, quiet certainty that I would survive this. The legal proceedings that followed were less dramatic than I'd feared, but more complicated than I'd hoped. His attorney tried to claim that my inheritance had been fully commingled with marital assets and should be divided accordingly. Patricia countered with documentation showing that the majority had been kept separate and that recent attempts to access it constituted fraud. His attorney argued that the Michigan property had been used as a family vacation home and thus was partly his. Patricia presented the original deed, family history documentation, and evidence that all maintenance costs had been paid from my separate accounts. His attorney demanded alimony based on income disparity in the later years of our marriage. Patricia produced records showing the consulting fees diverted to offshore accounts, income he had hidden to avoid sharing but now couldn't claim hardship. 6 months after that Friday morning ambush, we sat in a courthouse conference room for the final settlement conference. He looked older, the confident smirk replaced by grim resignation. His attorney spoke quietly to Patricia, then to him. Papers were passed across the table. Terms were agreed upon. In the end, I kept my inheritance, the Michigan property, my retirement accounts, and 65% of our marital assets. He kept his retirement, his hidden accounts, once they were fully disclosed, and the remaining 35% of what we had built together. The judge reviewing our settlement agreement, a woman perhaps my own age, looked over her reading glasses at my soon-to-be ex-husband. "I've been on the bench for 20 years, she said, her voice carrying in the quiet courtroom. "And I've seen countless divorces. Rarely have I seen such clear evidence of premeditated financial misconduct." She signed the decree, then added, Consider yourself fortunate that your wife was willing to settle rather than pursue criminal charges for financial fraud. As we left the courtroom, he tried to speak to me, but I walked past him toward the elevator, Patricia at my side. Whatever he wanted to say, justification, apology, accusation, I had no interest in hearing it. 32 years of his words had been enough. "You did well," Patricia said as we descended to the lobby. "Most people in your situation panic, confront, or give up. You planned, you protected, and you prevailed." I thought about that as I drove home. My home now, legally and completely. The betrayal still hurt. 3 decades of shared history couldn't be erased by victory in court. But beneath the pain was something stronger. Pride in my own resilience, my refusal to be victimized, my capacity to fight with cold clarity rather than hot emotion. That evening I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors no artist could fully capture. My phone buzzed with a text from my daughter. "How did it go?" "Are you okay?" I typed back, "It's finalized. I'm more than okay. I'm free." And I was. Free from deception. Free from the slow-motion car crash of the past year. Free to decide what the next chapter of my life would look like. 2 years have passed since that day in court. I've sold the Colonial and bought a smaller home closer to downtown, where I can walk to cafes and the library. I've renovated the Michigan property and spend summers there with my daughter and her family. I've started consulting for school districts, launching leadership development programs, finding unexpected joy in sharing the expertise I built over decades. I've learned some crucial lessons along the way, lessons I share now with other women in similar situations. First, trust your instincts. That uneasy feeling I had for months wasn't paranoia. It was my subconscious processing subtle changes before my conscious mind could name them. Second, don't confront until you're protected. Emotional confrontation gives the other person time to hide assets and strengthen their position. Strategic silence buys you time to secure what's rightfully yours. Third, document everything. Bank statements, unusual transfers, changes in pattern, recordings if legal in your state. Evidence is your strongest ally, especially when dealing with someone who believes they're smarter than you are. Fourth, understand what's legally yours. In most states, inheritances and family properties can be protected if you move quickly and correctly. Premarital assets often have special status. Retirement accounts have specific rules. Knowledge is literally power. Fifth, assemble the right team. I couldn't have navigated this alone. My attorney, the financial forensic specialist, even the private investigator. Each played a crucial role in preserving what I'd spent a lifetime building. I sometimes wonder if he ever realized how thoroughly he underestimated me. If he ever understood that in seeing me as an easy target, a trusting wife who could be discarded once her usefulness and assets had been extracted. He revealed more about himself than about me. What I know for certain is this. At 58, I discovered strengths I didn't know I possessed. I reclaimed not just my financial security, but my identity separate from the role of wife. I rebuilt my life on my own terms. If you're watching this and recognizing your own situation in mine, remember that the first step isn't confrontation. It's protection. It's planning. It's a clear-eyed assessment of what you've built and what you stand to lose. And it's the unshakable conviction that you deserve better than betrayal. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Have you faced similar challenges? Found unexpected strength in difficult circumstances? Made a fresh start when you least expected to? Subscribe for more true stories of late-life justice and reinvention. Remember, our second acts can be our most powerful, not despite our scars, but because of the wisdom they've given us.